Welcome to our little coffee chat. My name is David Gaines, and we're going to talk about Social Enterprise 101, just really the beginning steps of social enterprises. Maybe you're a nonprofit is looking to uh, add this financial element to your organization, or you could be in the startup stage where you are looking to do some kind of social good or social work in the world through a business component. Or you might be a for-profit traditional small business that is ready to look at, how do I actually have a social impact as well? So really this coffee chat is uh, around that topic, from idea to income, and how we talk through that. Um, so we'll talk through the history and kind of go through this presentation for the first half. But being a coffee chat, part of the idea is that we'll be able to have a little bit more informal questions and answers as we go through it. I just kind of full disclosure, I can only see my presentation. I can't see any faces. So if there's any kind of hand raising, I was trying to look for that in the setting, but whatever questions you might have during the presentation, if you can write those down just on your own paper at your computer, we'll definitely save some time at the end to go through any kind of questions or have some more, just that informal conversation and dialogue. Okay, so as we begin, my name is David Gaines, and I own a local coffee roastery in Cincinnati, Ohio, called La Terza Coffee. La Terza is Italian, and that's our way to say, hey, Italy, thank you very much for inventing espresso. And then the direct translation for the name is the third. And really, our brand is about how do we empower the third place. So I am a coffee lover. I've always loved coffee, but um, the draw for me for this business was the social impact that we could have. So on one hand, I've owned the brand for 13 years, and the draw for me was this direct trade relationship with a producer, and how do we ensure things like living wage or coffee, unfortunately, is a modern day slave trade product, usually taking the form of indentured servitude. So by knowing the relationship and having that connection with the producers directly, we could kind of combat that. So that's the draw for me. The coffee has lots of other social impacts as well, including empowering the third place, which is really a community gathering space. It gets its name because it's not your home, it's not your work, but here's this community living room. And I would argue today, especially in a world that is a little bit too digitized and we're behind our phones a little bit too often, and things like politics are so heated, we need more third places now than ever, safe places where we can come together to actually talk to one another, to air out our differences, but also through that process, see exactly how much we have in common. So, coffee for me, the draw to coffee and owning a coffee roasting business is all about social impact. That story actually led me to write a book called Radical Business: The Root of Your Work and How It Can Change the World. We'll unpack bits and pieces of this throughout this presentation, but uh, defining social enterprise, defining good, defining like how much good could I use my business to make a positive impact were all questions that I was wrestling with as I got started in the coffee space. So the book is about social impact businesses, and again, how you can take your business to have social impact, but just a lot of it is case studies and learning across the way for me, how I was able to have not just these initial two stories of social impact, but how could I use all aspects of my business to make the world a better place? And that leads me to today. So I was fortunate enough to serve as the board chairperson for Social Enterprise for 2.5 years, um, and was able to connect with a lot of other social impact organizations. Was really proud of the work that we did for Social Enterprise to go through the pandemic, to figure out how we can continue to build and invest and empower this ecosystem. And now today, what I'm doing is with the book and with a lot of these connections, I've had a lot of people ask me about coaching. So I've played on this word radical, and my last name is Gaines. So the brand Radical Gains Coaching. How do we do well, which is, I think, the impact that you can have in terms of your revenue. How do we do well personally with our businesses and organizations? How do we do good with the social impact that we're all looking for doing? And then ultimately, where's that sweet spot where we can do both? It's not trying to be exclusive about social impact or exclusive about making money, but integrating both. How do we do that? So uh, we'll touch on this a little bit at the end, but this is who I am today, and showing up to the world is really empowering. Again, both those audiences, the nonprofit traditional space, how do we increase your revenue and impact? For the for-profits, how do we increase your impact while also increasing your revenue, and ultimately doing both? And for me, as I discovered this business model of social enterprise, which I was not aware of when I started the coffee business, that for me was just a huge turning point where I saw how all businesses could make the world a better place. And that realization is what changed everything for me. So, um, my mouse is not working. So for the admin on there, I see someone trying to come in. All right, here, I'll just do it. Okay, so again, if I go back to where I was when I got involved with coffee, the draw was the social impact that we were having. And it really led me to this first initial question. Like, this was a good business. I really love the fact that I could have a social impact while also growing the for-profit side of the business. And the more that we grew the for-profit side, the more social impact that we could have. And they were directly tied to one another. So it asked me this question, like, well, if I'm a good business, how do I find other good businesses? Which really begs the question, how do we define good? And here's a handful of organizations, Social Enterprise Alliance included, that are words and phrases that might mean good. And we all have a little bit of our own spin on what good means. But I also just wrestled with this question because, in a lot of ways, just a traditional business was offering me uh, a lot of good things. So, for example, I'm in Cincinnati and we're home to P&G and Kroger. So, two very large organizations. And P&G is got their beginning, over 100 years ago by making soap. I'm like, well, if soap didn't exist, but then all of a sudden we had an organization that was inventing soap and it was making the world safer, something that was pretty important during the pandemic, we might call that a social enterprise. So I'm not suggesting that P&G is a social enterprise, but I'm suggesting that good is a really interesting thing to unpack, and that ultimately it's not binary. It's not a this or that. Like, our brains really like to put everything in boxes. You're either good or you're bad. You're either my enemy or you're my friend. You're either a Republican or you're a Democrat. And that's not really how life works. It's the way our brain likes to work, because our brain likes to take lots of shortcuts, but that's not the reality. And so, again, while P&G or any other corporation is not a social enterprise, it would also be a mistake to say, hey, they're not doing anything good. And there's lots of things that they might be doing bad, but there are some things that they are doing good also. And so I call that out because it's not an easy question. And I think we've constantly, and all these organizations and even world organizations are constantly wrestling with this question as we try to define what social impact means or what social enterprise means. For me, as I was wrestling with this question, so I'm at this picture at this moment in time, I'm a few years into owning the coffee business. I'm I'm digging deep into this question and asking lots of friends who work in corporate America and lots of friends who are in social enterprises and everyone in between, and just continuing to wrestle with what exactly this definition of good means. uh, I was at this moment, and this is a picture of going to the farm in Honduras for the first time. So we have a direct trade relationship with a woman producer in Honduras. Again, through that relationship, we know that there's a living wage component. We know people are treated really well. And I'm walking up to this photo, and what this woman is doing. It's actually really hard to describe in words the moment, but she radiated joy. She just was really, really happy about life, and it was contagious. And what she's doing right here in this photo is sorting the different coffee cherries. So, there's lots of sorting that happens at lots of different stages of coffee, and I won't go into that detail, but ultimately, what she's doing here is separating coffee into three basic categories. Specialty coffee, that's the kind that I buy. It's like the highest end quality. Then there's a middle grade, which is like the commodity, conventional coffee. And then there's just coffee that they're really small, or maybe they've had a little bit of insect damage. It's still good coffee. It can be roasted, but it's not going to have a lot of flavor. So that is in a third pile, and that's basically made into instant coffee. The reason why this moment was so important to me is that as I was wrestling with what it means to be good, what it means to be good in business, what it means to have social impact, this moment humanized the whole thing. I realized that to be human is to make things. And so when we talk about social enterprise or social impact or conscious capitalism, really what we're talking about is there are to buy anything, there's a human behind it, whether it's coffee or my hat or shirt or this website or a logo. Someone made it. Even minerals, someone had to dig it up or find it. Like, you cannot buy anything that does not have human hands behind it. And I think that that's part of the human story. There's a reason why we ask the question, like if I'm meeting someone for the first time, hey, what's your name? The second question is, what do you do? Now, that particular question can be loaded. Like if you don't like your job, or if you don't feel like you have purpose and meaning, or if you don't have work, that's an uncomfortable question to be asked or to answer. But the root of the question ultimately is that to be human is to make stuff. That's part of what we do, right? And it's part of what separates us from other animals, is that we make things. And part of making things is selling things and consuming things and trading. And so I think when I wrestle with the question of what it means to be good, it really comes down to maybe what we all learn in kindergarten: treat other people the way you want to be treated. And if that's true, if that's the kind of baseline definition what it means to have social impact, then we're talking about there's 7 different stakeholders that every organization touches. And this is true whether you're having social impact or not. You touch these groups of people. So my story begins in the supply chain, and I'm about living wages in all these other parts of the world that are producing coffee. But it quickly moves on beyond that, right? How am I creating a great environment for my team? If I'm about living wages in other parts of the world, I also have to kind of carry that ethic or that value into my day-to-day operations. How do we create living wages for people that work with me and in the coffee industry? So there's these 7 different people groups that we interact with, and each one of them is a stakeholder. And the more and more I wrestle with that question, this is why the word radical keeps coming back, is radical businesses, this first book, and this branding of radical gains. Radical in Latin means root or origin. It's kind of like to me, it's like deconstructing. I was wrestling with this question: what does good mean? And it's constantly deconstructing. And I think this is the root of it: is that if we can start with, as an organization, treating other people the way we'd want to be treated, then that maybe is the baseline definition of what it means to start this journey of social impact as organizations. Now, I've given you a lot of like context, and the reason why this matters so much is one of the fundamental things that I want to discuss as we're beginning the social enterprise journey. Again, as we're social enterprise 101, we're beginning the journey, or we're a nonprofit looking to add profit, or we're a for-profit looking to add impact. I want to start with the fact that you're probably already doing some really good and significant work, even if you might not qualify for a definition of what it means to be a social enterprise. At the root of your work, there's something that you're doing that is having a positive impact. The root of my coffee roasting business, for example, is to help people wake up. I have a 5 and 7-year-old boys. So just a few years ago, when they're 3 and 1, sleep was at a premium. And I'm really grateful that I had access to good coffee to help me get through the day. And I quite honestly, I felt like I needed it. So there's this social impact, even if it's the smallest version of social impact that we were having outside of all the other stories. And I think that's just really a healthy place to begin for people that are interested in the social impact journey. What is the good that you're already doing? So, in my experiences, for those that are beginning the social enterprise journey, again, serving in as on the national board for a number of years now, social serving in a lot of different local boards of social impact organizations, and now with the coaching services. Here's like the top 5 questions that I've heard for people that are beginning the social enterprise journey, and these are specifically from mostly from the people that are more the nonprofit that is looking to add the business, or just in general starting a new company, but you want to have strong social impact goals in the beginning. Question number 1: I know the cause that I want to support, but I don't know the parallel connection to a product or service. So again, like if you're a nonprofit and you're trying to add impact in, just like food insecurity, what's a product that would help and parallel with solving for food insecurity? For example, you don't necessarily want to start a social enterprise that is making and producing candles, which is completely irrelevant to having the social mission of your food insecurity. So what's the cause? I know the cause, but I don't know the parallel connection to a product or service. Question number 2 is, how do I get funding to begin? This question is asked almost all the time, and this can be asked at lots of different stages. In fact, a lot of, I think, social enterprises, the reason why they've become social enterprises from that non-traditional or traditional nonprofit route is funding is tough. And today, like government and contracts and grants, funding is becoming even more difficult. So if you're at the beginning stages, this is a difficult question. If you're already in it, this can be a difficult question. So, and that's one of the reasons why we want to try to solve for this is social enterprise ideally is increasing revenue for your organization, which is helping that donation dollar go a lot further. Number 3 question that we get asked a ton is, what is the right business model for me? Should I be a nonprofit? Should I be a for-profit? Is there this hybrid? A few states have a benefit corporation status. Which one is the right for me? It's a great question. Number 4, I am concerned that income initiatives would distract from my primary mission. So if your goal again is food insecurity, how do I not distract from that mission? And if I try to add and build a business on top of the social mission, how much will that distract me from the thing that I really care about and am passionate about? And number 5, my team and I already struggle with work-life balance. And this is true for almost everyone I meet that is in any kind of social business. Um, it's very difficult to add anything new. Your plate is already too full. We want to give of ourselves so much that it's very easy to fall into a trap of not having good work-life balance into what we're doing. So my hope is that through this one-on-one coffee chat, we can address a handful of these questions. And where I would like to begin is starting with why. Like, why do you want to start a social enterprise? Or if you already have one, what is the why of your organization? This is a question posed by a pretty famous business book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And I find it so useful for social impact organizations. I think inherently we have a built-in why that's more easily defined than maybe a traditional for-profit business. But I think being really clear on the why is a great way to get started, mainly for this first point. They can set your organizational values right away, and they can act as a guide that keeps you on your path of your true mission. So, my personal story to this one would be, what the first story that drew me into coffee was, hey, I want to be uh, anti-slavery in the way we buy coffee, right? So that's what drew me in, is this relationship to the producer. So I'm just like a year into buying the coffee. I'm settling in, to the business and understanding how it all works. And we were at a point where we wanted to buy company t-shirts with our logo on the front. Well, the textile industry is also not great when it comes to modern day slave trade practices or indenture servitude or sweat factories and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the value of the organization and the reason why I got involved was I wanted to think about trade and my supply chain from a completely different lens. That was the value. So it would be anti my value if I just went to buy whatever t-shirts from whatever website. I wanted to take that same value and apply it to the shirts that we were buying. And so that really set me up for success just personally. It helped me wrestle with this value question, but answer it right away. And I think that is so important because as social impact organizations, we're being driven by from a place of our values. We want the world to be a better place. We see something that's wrong in the world, and we're trying to have a mission that goes with it. Well, I promise you that anytime you have your values so explicitly out there, they're going to be tested often. Maybe not on purpose, but just kind of like my story. No one knew that I was wrestling with that story, but quickly I was at this intersection. Do I buy the shirts with the best price, which would be financially benefiting to my organization, or should I buy the ones that match and mirror my value, even if they cost a little bit more? There wasn't any discussion. It was able to help me make that decision very quickly. So this is just such a great spot to start for social enterprise organizations. Is why are you doing this? Um, when you have a very clear why, they do attract your customers. As you're trying to build that financial engine, that revenue engine, a strong and clearly articulated why will help you share that mission very clearly. It will help you in that fundraising stage. So if you are trying to get funders to be very clear about this is what we're doing and this is how we're going to do it, and this is ultimately why we're doing it, we see this problem, that is going to be really great for your messaging for them. And also like your team members, as you are growing and hiring employees now or for the future, the more clearly defined that purpose and mission are, the more easily you'll be attract really great talent and people who are also missionally aligned. The best teams for social enterprises are those that believe in all the things that you're doing, right? So those are all really important reasons why this is a great starting point. Finally, they really are important for you too. So if you're a leader, if you're someone who's starting an organization, the reality is social enterprises are really hard. We kind of are operating with business rules, but we're adding our own self-imposed rules. Like just in general, the business failure rate is really high, right? Well, if you're a social enterprise and you're trying to operate by a different set of values than a traditional for-profit business, that means you're adding more rules to the game. And it is hard sometimes, and it is exhausting, and there can be really long nights. And so the more clearly we articulate and define why we're doing what we're doing, the more on those hard days we're like, why am I even doing this? The more that we can remember, oh, right, this is why, and it's worth it. And, the pain is temporary. We'll solve for that problem today, but it helps me get up the next day with new energy to keep going when the times are a little bit more difficult. So this is where I want to take it into the next level, though, of treating other people the way you want to be treated. When you have your main mission, your why clearly identified, then we can start to look at these 7 stakeholders that I identified earlier and see how you can be fully aligned with your mission. Most of us have probably heard of like people, planet, profit, kind of 3 key stakeholders. And when we think about any organization, and there is significant movement towards being better for the people and for the planet. SEA is the People Planet for Verified organization. If you are an organization through the Social Enterprise World Forum, there's a verification called People Planet First. That's where we're getting this language. And so, hey, as an organization, if we're verified, we're saying we want to put people and planet first above profit. And I think that's a really important value. As I've identified the stakeholders, to me, there's 7 total, right? We talked about it a minute ago. But there's really five people groups, one planet, and one profit, which I think is a version of self-care. So as I wrestle with like ROI and the impact that we're having, and what I'll be kind of walking you through here in a moment is how do we measure what impact we're having with each of these seven categories? And we might just want to start with a few, but know that we're touching all seven, and maybe there's a way that we can think about adding each of these seven as a whole to our organization and starting to think about impact in a much broader sense. So again, my story begins with the supply chain. How do we have that relationship with the producer? We can ask more honest questions. Through relationship, we can maybe get better products. But again, the supply chain is not like a checkbox. It's not that, hey, I bought my coffee, check, we're done with our social impact. No, we apply those principles to things like t-shirts. And in Cincinnati, we actually have a really amazing social enterprise here called Buyability, which empowers, they sell office supplies, and they teach people who become blind as adults how to use new audible computer programs. So, if you're an adult and all of a sudden you have this degenerative eye disease and you lose your vision right away, I wouldn't know how to operate, and people can lose their vision very quickly in some cases. So I would have to relearn how do I do everything, how to get around my house. I wouldn't be able to drive anymore. How do I use a computer? So that's a great social enterprise. They simply sell office supplies, but they are part of my supply chain, and I use them to buy things like paper and scissors and pens and all that kind of stuff. And we're able to have our social impact um, increase because and have a ripple effect because of this kind of supply chain opportunity. Again, how are we impacting our team members? So a part of this is about living wages, but I think so much of it also is just the culture that we create. Um, and like, how do we have really good just wellness policies? How, as an organization, can I be making sure that people as a whole are having a good and healthy work-life balance? Like, if my whole team members, if my whole team is exhausted, in part because of the social mission, and they care so deeply about what we're all doing, like eventually we do get to a place of burnout, and then the effectiveness that we might have as a team within our social enterprise organization can dramatically and negatively be affected. So when I think about team members, it's not just about pay, but it is about so much uh, you know, so many other factors, including culture and getting along. And, if you work full time with a team of people and spend 40 hours a week or more with those folks, you're actually spending more time with the people that you work with than you are your friends and your family, people that you're choosing to spend time with. So investing in a strong team culture is really important. I want to pause and say, as a social enterprise, one of the things that I've noticed as I've been teaching and coaching on these principles is that your team members are actually where you can have your deepest impact. So your social mission is going to be like your number one priority, right? But your team members and the way that you do business and the way that you lead meetings and the way that you care for one another, that is going to have the deeper impact than whatever cause that you're going to be about. It's not to negate the importance of the cause, but just the personal relationship is just so deep, and you're with people very often. When you go to someone and ask how they're doing, and you're genuine and saying hi to people in the morning as you come into work, that will have a much deeper social impact than the social mission will for an individual. I kind of like to think of it this way: like, you can, in your social impact, you can be narrow and deep. Like, we're going to go very, very deep with a particular mission, or you can be a little bit shallow and wide. And there's a variation of those two components. When you think about your social impact, it's a wide net, but maybe the impact's a lot more shallow. um, with all these different stakeholders, I think there's a balance game between those two, and you can put intentionality around how deep we might want to go. But just by the sheer nature of proximity, the team members is always going to be a very narrow and deep version of social impact. And the social mission version is going to be a little bit wider, again, varying degrees, but wider and shallower than the opportunities that you have with your team members. Conversely, we see this if we just have toxic environments, right? If we're overworked, again, like it diminishes the mission, it diminishes the culture, and even if you want to add more social impact initiatives in what you're trying to do, or if you're starting a social enterprise and you want to really be deeply invested in the impact that you're going to have, you got to have a great culture. If you're constantly fighting and having a toxic culture with your team, you're severely limited on the impact that you can have. So as a social enterprise, I kind of think this might be one of the most important categories that we do. So I just wanted to pause and highlight that. The third stakeholder would be, how do we treat our customers well? For me, it's like, we want you to buy our coffee because it's amazing. And we lead with that in terms of our marketing. And for us, social impact is very important too, but we've prioritized quality and then social mission, and they're neck and neck, but it is with that order in mind. And the main principle behind that is because we want to treat our customers the way we'd want to be treated. I don't want to overstate our social impact goals. I don't want to say, hey, buy our coffee because look at all this work that we're doing. And we kind of forget then that the quality of the coffee is important, or whatever, that goal might be. So um, I think treating your customers the way you want to be treated is being authentic with our marketing. It's not trying to manipulate, which is a really easy thing to do and unintentionally for sure. But we don't want to manipulate our customer to buy something because it has a strong story. We want our customers to buy something because it is a great product, or is convenient, or the product or service alone is a reason to buy something. And it also supports the social impact mission. And that's kind of a way to safeguard your customers as a stakeholder. How are you impacting your community as a social impact organization? For many, this is probably inherent in what you do. If you're about second chance, but ultimately, there's just lots of ripple effects, even financially, that a social enterprise, for every dollar we receive as a social enterprise, has a significant ripple effect into the community, and based on how much financial impact it can have. So this one usually occurs pretty naturally, but I think it's important to call out, like, there are organizations that don't easily align with yours, or there are people that maybe are not buying your products. Like, if I'm putting my coffee hat on, there are lots of coffee roasters in my city, and someone that's my neighbor might prefer someone else's coffee over mine. And coffee's subjective. I think ours is pretty good, but there's a lot of other roasters that are pretty good. So just because they might not choose to buy coffee from me doesn't mean they're not part of my community. Doesn't mean they're not my neighbor. So they are a significant stakeholder to a social enterprise. I hinted at this one a moment ago, but your competition is the stakeholder too. Treating other people the way you want to be treated, treating your competitor the way want to be treated, is it can be difficult. Depends on your industry, but especially when we think about, like, and more again, the nonprofit segment, when we're all fighting for the same grant dollars, it can be pretty competitive, and sometimes not in a healthy way. And so I think it's important to really call this one out. And while it is difficult, it is important to know that we have this space, and we have people that are maybe running neck and neck with us, that are humans too, that are making something too. And honestly, if they weren't fighting for the same dollar or for the same customer, these are people in life that we probably would have as friends, right? The other coffee roasters in Cincinnati, man, they care about living just the way I do. They go and travel to these communities and care about culture the way that I do. We have all of these things in common. And the reality is that we would have a lot in common, and would have a friendship if we weren't also in competition with each other. So for this space, I, well, let me stay on coffee just real quick. I think it's important to know, though, that, like, because of competition, we can do a lot of things. So again, I won't go into too many details with coffee, but it is the third trending commodity in the world. So many roasters today, that this wasn't the case when I got started, but today there's a lot of roasters around the US that have this living wage, anti-slavery, know the producer component to what they do. And I think right now we have an opportunity because of competition to set a brand new standard for global trade, right? Like I care about all coffee being bought and sold really well. And I'm not going to buy all the coffee. It's impossible. But collectively, our voice can come together and say, no, this is the way that we're going to do things. It's anti-slavery. And through competition, our voice actually is increasing. We have to cling to the truth that a rising tide raises all ships. And so as a social enterprise, I think it's healthy to like be thinking about reframing this particular category. While they're my competitor, there may be some ways that we can also work in collaboration. And how do I view my competitor as a collaborator as well? I'm not asking people to make their giveaway trade secrets or anything like that, but know that we're on the same team. And especially this shows up in social enterprise. We more often than not are trying to do the same thing. And it would be better served if we could work in some ways together on our shared missions. And so this one, while difficult, I think it's worth really thinking through how you can have positive impact as a social enterprise. Because collectively it's going to be much, much more beneficial for the larger good. So those were the 5 people groups. If I put Mother Earth as a people, the environment and caring for the planet is a great stakeholder. I think a lot of, like when we think about corporate social responsibility and traditional large businesses trying to be better at what they're doing, this has been historically where they're making some of their first steps towards rethinking how they are better citizens as businesses. So, this is again important to reminder. Like, if your social mission is about food insecurity, just double check that you have a recycling program too. It's you don't want to. They're loosely related to each other, and you want to make sure that you're kind of hitting all the uh, impact goals that you might have. And then again, like people, planet, profit. So planet was environment. Self-care, I do put into that profit category. And I think it is important to call profit out as it's not bad. Sometimes I think we subconsciously find ourselves in a trap of social enterprises that we just inherently think that profit's bad. And that's just not true. Profit is a version of self-care. I would say that I learned that the hard way. Like I was caring for so many other people and not really making sure that I also was earning a living wage. And fortunately, I've been able to get to a point where I'm better at that category and being able to provide for my family and not, of course, money's only one component, but being better at having a uh, work-life balance, like being better at getting enough rest and taking some time off and recharging my batteries. All of those things have significant importance to think about how we think about social enterprises and the work that we bring to it. It's very similar to the whole airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first before you put that on of your neighbor. Of all those 6 stakeholders, if we really want to have deep and true impact with all those stakeholders, this one we have to do first. And so I think it's really important to make sure that we highlight. And I think it is important, while we don't want to be over profitable, which is why I think when we think about traditional businesses and CEOs and the wage gaps, like the discrepancy between how much the top earners make and the bottom earners, it's ridiculous, right? So it's easy to think like, well, profit is just therefore bad. No, 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 no. Over profit is bad. But healthy profit is really a version of self-care in it. And I think it's important as those of us that are on the social impact journeys to be aware that profit is good. And the goal is that a thriving social enterprise is one that is also making money and it's self-sustaining. And that only deepens the impact opportunities that we have. So this is a pretty important category. Okay, so where do we go from here? So I gave you like a fire hose of information. Um, Want to pause just for a second and just reflect on this 7 stakeholders. So if you're an organization that's a social enterprise and you've been on this journey, just where are you at on each one of these categories? And you maybe for environment, maybe there's like very little that you're doing. Maybe you don't have a recycling program, but you know, I don't know that you are combining trips, you know, or you're thinking through um, bringing in your supplies that are like uh, not using mass transportation or something like that, or using transportation, some kind of category. I think even if you're not doing something big in each one of these categories, it's really worth writing down something that you might be doing small. So, for example, when I was kind of unpacking these seven stakeholders just in my own practices, we were not doing that much with environment. We did have some like compostable packaging, but not a lot. Um, but we were using like lots of boxes. And so there were lots of things that I was like, well, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't be more energy efficient at the moment. And, all the lots of layers to that particular category. But what I could do was rent a recycling dumpster, and we began a recycling program. So that was at the very beginning of me getting involved with our organization. Today we've helped launch a social enterprise that's a composting company. We were the first client for someone coming by on a weekly basis to gather all of our compost. And as a coffee roaster, we were making some really amazing compost. So by starting somewhere small, we were able to be in the right position to do something with more significance, because we recognized that the small thing did lead us down a path to doing something bigger with bigger impact. And I think that the other thing that we should keep in mind is the power of small is way more powerful than we might realize. Sticking on the environment and recycling thing, this one piece of paper, like if I have this one piece of paper, does it really matter whether I recycle it or not? And the answer is kind of yes and no. So the answer is no, because it's one piece of paper. It's just not going to have that much of an impact, right? But the answer is yes, I think, for two reasons. One, um, the piece of paper, I'm trying to live better. And sometimes that small habit is what leads to extra habits. Like it's not that much work to think about recycling in one piece of paper. So, and that helps me think about combining my trips. Like the one thing helps me think about how to have impact in many other ways. But we also have to remember that the one piece of paper, when we scale it up, is a big, big deal. There are 330 million people that live in the US. And if we all recycled one extra piece of paper per day, or use like a tablet instead of a piece of paper, and reduce the need for that piece of paper, we would reduce collectively the need to cut down nearly 40,000 trees per day. If you take that throughout the course of a year, 365 days, that's almost 14 million trees per year. And the number one way, the easiest, most cost effective, simple thing that we can do to combat something as huge as climate change is to plant trees. Imagine planting tree initiatives with the power of recycling one piece of paper per day initiatives. I think that that's achievable. And if we all could do it, we could have a significant environmental impact and immediately start to reverse the negative effects of climate change. So we have to remember the power of the one thing, small thing is bigger than we realize. And the more of us that there are that are on this journey, the more that we can empower each other. But we're all part of a greater good and a greater collective. So when I think about going from here, also, now that I've identified maybe what you're currently doing within your organization, I think there's two more questions to ask. Of these seven different stakeholders, where do you dream support looks like for each one 5 years from now? So that's a very future question. Okay, here's where I am today in my supply chain stakeholder. Maybe you learned a few new things about how to expand that supply chain idea today. Um, how do I look at increasing the impact, and what could that be in 5 years? It's a very great future question. It helps you identify like your long-term goals and where to point the ship. And then equally important is, okay, well, here's where I want to go. Like when I was talking about my environmental category, I was like, well, I want to have compostable packaging. That's not what is available today. But what is available and is I could do that recycling program, right? So wherever you're at, after you've done that first exercise, what you are currently doing in each of these stakeholders, where do you want that 5 year vision to be? but what's the next thing that you can do today? And we have to remember, being a social entrepreneur is joining a journey. We're all trying to make the world a better place, and it's one step at a time. Personally, for me and my organization, I'm nowhere near where I want to be in terms of the social impact that we can have. But I know where I want the next step to be, and if I focus on that, then I feel like I'm accomplishing something a little bit every day, and we're making progress. So Um, this goes back to those questions that we answered. Hopefully, through the course of this content, we can say like, "Hey, here's the cause that I want to support." Hopefully, I've given you some ideas about how to create a parallel connection to a product or service to go with your cause. Hopefully, we've talked about like income initiatives that if there things are in parallel with your mission and your organization, they won't be distracted. They will be complementing, and hopefully that we've talked about like just how important your team is and investing with them, and again, having lots of social impact ideas around all the stakeholders will help you deepen your impact with minimal effort. And so the goal would be, it strengthens your social impact, it strengthens your social mission, and let's if your team is struggling with work-life balance, let's add the things that we can add without overwhelming or increasing any workload, but then we can work and go backwards to addressing your team. In terms of how do I get funding and which business model is right for me, those are difficult to answer in a group setting just because we would either need a coffee chat that is specific to that and discusses lots of options, or that really requires like one-on-one and a lot more interaction. And then finally, again, I really do mean what I say. I hope that this is the beginning of a conversation, and I would love to just connect with you all individually at this point and just have had lots of experiences being able to help social enterprises. But that discovery call is really free to anyone. I just want to keep growing the network, keep growing the impact that other people are having. So if you click on that code, that QR code, that'll take you to my Calendly link, which is just for a 30-minute call. I would love to hear feedback. And if there's something I can do to help you and your organization think through your profitability, increasing your impact, doing good and doing well, I certainly want to create that space. So I'm here. How can I help?